Hello, and welcome to The Golden Hammer, or Hacking Your Brain. Another clickbait in the title. Take a break. My name is Andrew Miller. Thanks so much for choosing this session. Have you ever heard that IT is constantly changing? We always need to be learning. It's kind of obvious, right? The real question is, how do we do that? Now, when I used to do this session in person, this is where I would stop with a dramatic pause and go quiet and pick this up. I've actually still got one of these, literally actually a golden hammer, like it says. And take a block of wood, and walk up to someone in the room with the hammer, the block of wood, a couple nails. Say, hey, do you mind trying to hammer this in? And usually it would go just fine. Hadn't had anyone hurt themselves yet. Nope, that's possible. Then I'd choose someone else and say, hey, let me give you a couple of these. Do you think that's going to work very well? And maybe, hey, go ahead and try. They try, and usually you could kind of get it to work. We all know it can work. It's not necessarily ideal, but hey, it can. Now, and then of course, what I continue with is what's actually kind of fun about this hammer is this, that, you literally can take it apart, and inside, it's not just a hammer. There's a screwdriver. Here's a flathead. We keep going a little bit further. Hey, there's a Phillips head. It actually keeps going all the way down inside, just like you see there. Fun. And then actually, especially if I was going to be flying back after whatever VMUG UserCon, whoever was lucky in the room and really wanted a golden hammer, only $10 on Amazon, would get it. And if you really want one, you're really sad that you don't get the freebie as the giveaway. Hey, you can find it on Amazon too. In case we haven't had the pleasure of meeting, my name is Andrew Miller. You can find me on Twitter at @andriven. Feel free to tweet during this session. I blogged on and off for the last 10 years or so. I do have a job. I work currently as a principal technology strategist. If we've met before at VMUG UserCons, I was probably in a different role at the time, building out a tech marketing team, actually kind of like it shows there. Probably most importantly for today, I started on the customer side for 7 years. Admin to engineer to architect. Started with VI3 because I really wanted HA and DRS. Played previously actually with 2.5 before we implemented VI3. Customer side, then partner for about 8 years. SE to manager director. Make promises on the whiteboard. If they come true, you get to come back. If not, not so much. 2 years building out a tech marketing team, spending a week or two a month in Palo Alto. And now really enjoying the role at Pure, where I work with larger customers and partners and liaison between product management and engineering. So good stuff. And from a community standpoint, really appreciate the VMware user community. I have maintained vExpert over the years. Really appreciate both the vExpert program and try to contribute back, such as this community session. I'm also human too, right? I've got kids, 2 and 11-year-old boys, and I bet this is the only picture of a kangaroo you'll see today. Well, according to some of my friends in Australia, they're more maybe sometimes seen as pests over there. Over here, I think in America, you always smile when you see a kangaroo, right? So, okay. Now, when I was first coming up with this session and thinking about it, my coworker Rebecca Fitzhugh at the time said, hey, if you're really going to be committed to this, you need to show up in that. I was like, I don't think that anyone out there wants to see this in that, right? So don't worry. It's not going to be that, and that doesn't work quite as well, when you can only see me from the shoulders up. But, just imagine that you're not seeing me in this. What we're actually talking about when we're talking about the golden hammer is we're talking about this gentleman. You may know who he is, and I want to take a guess out there, if this was live again. This is Abraham Maslow. He's probably most famous for this, the hierarchy of needs. That we want to have self-esteem and love and belonging, hopefully be self-actualized, but frankly, first we need our physical needs taken care of, physiological, safety and security. Otherwise, this other stuff, it just doesn't matter, right? Now, of course, there is the much more accurate current version of this where we have properly inserted good Wi-Fi signal and battery life all the way as the most foundational items. The other thing, though, that Abraham Maslow is famous for is this, the formulation of this concept stated this way. If you only have a hammer, you tend to see every problem as a nail. Have you ever known a CIO for whom the only answer is to the cloud? Or maybe an IT worker, engineer, admin, for whom a script, I'm going to write a script, is the answer to everything. Or an IT director for whom, hey, can we check with the vendor? That's the universal answer. We all know that we need multiple ways to look at the world. Sometimes we laugh at people that don't, right? Hopefully in good humor. But what we're talking about here is we're actually talking about mental models, the thought processes we use in how we understand the world, how we take information, store and process it. How do we think? How do we understand a domain, a group of knowledge? How do we anticipate the world and make sensible decisions about what to do? What really triggers our underlying thinking and reasoning? Now, there's a gentleman, Charlie Munger. You may have heard of him, may not. If you haven't heard of him, I bet that you've heard of Warren Buffett. Okay, so Warren Buffett is insanely, incredibly rich. Charlie Munger is just insanely rich because he's Warren Buffett's partner in Berkshire Hathaway. So rich and famous, like it says there, or somewhat famous. But great quote. It's undeniably true. The human brain must work in models. The trick is to have your brain work better than other people's brains because it has more models to use, ones that will do the most work relatively kind of thing. And wait just a minute, though. What did I just do? Likely, 60 seconds ago, I hadn't heard of this guy, Charlie Munger. I say some things, Warren Buffett, et cetera. You're like, oh, yeah. What I was just doing there was an appeal to authority. Now, wait a minute. Is that good or bad? Or is it either? Well, think of it. We, every week, year, month, depending on how often, we go to the doctor, we go to the dentist, et cetera. Trust me, I'm a doctor, right? So appeal to authority isn't automatically wrong. Do we trust that authority? Is the authority that gives us our paycheck every week or month, kind of thing? Our parents. But it's an appeal. Let's think about that same appeal, the same appeal to an authority of a doctor 50 years ago or so, maybe 75, whatever this is, right? I don't think any of us, regardless, and I'm not trying to call anyone out here, okay? But none of us would expect to go to the doctor and get this kind of recommendation from that exact same authority, right? So how we think determines how we act. We all have mental models. The key is, do we know what they are? Do you know yours? They're imperfect, but they're useful. They allow us to make assumptions about how things work, to understand more quickly. They do also unconsciously influence our behavior and our decision-making. So again, continuing actually that quote from Charlie Munger. The first rule, you can't really know anything if you just have isolated facts and you try and, kind of just repeat them back. If the facts don't hang together on a lattice work of theory, you don't have them in a usable form. So what are the models? The first rule is you need to have multiple models. Like it says there, diversification. Same as the principle as with finances, right? If you just have one or two that you're using, the nature is of human psychology is you're going to torture reality. You're going to twist reality so that it fits your models, or at least you'll think that it does, and that's dangerous. So real fast, who here thinks that stereotypes are a good thing? Imagine we're in person. Who thinks they're a bad thing? Who's not really sure? Well, if I'm using a stereotype to understand someone more quickly, in a good way, I want to understand them, I want to help them, I want to build a friendship, build a relationship, it's not bad. If I force them into that stereotype that I assume too quickly at the beginning and don't take other data about that person as it comes in, well, that's not healthy, right? It's a tool, though. Mental models, stereotypes, they're a tool. So what we're going to do for the rest of this presentation is talk a little bit about mental models, and we're going to go through some of them, just an assortment, and tell IC stories along the way to illustrate that hopefully will be interesting. And, if not, at least you'll get to see some fun pictures. First, who here has heard of Occam's razor? Often I'll get, decent feedback there. Who's heard of Hamlin's razor? Usually fewer. So for Occam's razor, among competing hypotheses, the one with the fewest assumptions should be selected. Or, the KISS principle. Keep it simple, stupid, right? Let's even flip that around a little bit. The idea that complexity is the enemy of reliability. If you're in doubt, choose the simplest option. I've got some experience here. Straight out of college, I was working in an IT operations department, and actually we started with NetWare. And if you remember back to those days, there were a lot of different options and configurations, things that you could tweak. You put stuff in NCF files on startup, etc. And so I dove all the way in. I wanted to read the entire manual, configure everything to be optimally just totally optimal for our environment, which actually worked out kind of well until I got to upgrade time, especially overnight upgrade time. Now, do you think that vendors plan for somebody fresh out of college kid to go and tweak almost every single option, and they plan for that in their upgrade scripts and modeling? Probably not. And given what I know now, no, they do not. So the time that you find that out, even if you've done some pre-upgrade planning, is potentially in the middle of the night when you're doing those upgrades, right? Lesson learned. Hanlon's razor. Never attribute to malice that which is adequately explained by stupidity. Or don't assume someone is out to get you when they might just be kind of clueless. I actually had a coworker like this where worked in a really great environment, really great coworkers. We could brainstorm, work together, etc. And he came previously from an environment that was just toxic politically. Backstabbing, people pushing other people down. It was never this person's fault. They would, not the person we hire, but, other people's fault. They try and blame it on someone else or, make them look bad so their problems wouldn't be seen. And so for a while after he came on board, I was like, is he out to get me? And it's hard to work with. And I realized they were actually having a really good manager, good boss at the time, that, he was almost clueless about what it was like to work in an environment where people weren't out to get you. Don't assume it's malice. We can explain by just cluelessness. And he mellowed out over time. It was actually really cool to work with. Anyone know what this is? I'm a child of the 80s. Okay, so this is, I think I would still prefer this one over the current, today's Acura NSX. That's what it is. So let's go back to the time when Japan was going to take over the world. Property values in Japan, Tokyo were insane. Japan was gaining market share in the automobile industry. U.S. automakers felt there might be a reason for this, aside from, maybe inexpensive labor, protected home markets, tariffs, that kind of stuff. So somehow they actually managed Detroit executives to visit factories in Japan. And what they saw there when they walked in was they saw no inventory. And they thought it must be staged. So their mental model was real plants have inventory. These plants don't. Our hosts must have staged fake plants, kind of Potemkin villages to hide from us what's really going on. The reality was they were seeing the beginnings of just-in-time manufacturing. Maybe not at that point, not even the beginning, but, earlier stages of it. So do you see the problem? When you have mental models, you don't realize them. Let's pull a military term into this conversation. A lack of situational awareness. So they were seeing the beginning of lean production, assembly line methodology developed originally for Toyota, manufacturing automobiles. It was Toyota production system, lean production principles, even Kanban, some of that kind of stuff, are prevalent now today in supply chains and otherwise. Who doesn't love pie? I'll admit, I prefer fruity desserts over chocolate ones. There's no shame there at all. So even seeing this, I'm like, I'd like a piece of pie right now. Not going to happen, unfortunately. We'll keep going. But this is the idea of a zero-sum game. That by definition, if you have that piece of pie, I can't have it. And if everyone gets a piece of pie, there's only so many pieces to be had without making them smaller. So for me to win, you must lose. Now, there's ultimately zero-sum game. Now, this can be challenging if we assume this is the case, or in some cases, I'd even make a little bit of a career commentary here. So part of the reason that I joined one partner, I joined they were about employee 30, joined as an SE. And about 5 years, they were about 5x to 150 folks. I joined because I wanted to be in an expanding pie, expanding pool, but whichever metaphor we want to mix in here. And it worked out well. There was one point where there was hiring for a role around VDI and EUC stuff. And I actually got passed over, and the CEO later called me and actually was apologetic. Was like, I should have talked to you about this, small company. But I just we're busy, and there was this guy who seemed a really good fit, and I hope you don't mind and aren't offended, and you'll stay and keep doing good work, etc. And I didn't mind. And part of it was I'm human. It stung a little bit, but the company's growing. There's going to be more opportunities here. It's not a zero-sum game. Or sometimes working with customers as an SE previously in the past, where we know what their budget is. You can only beat on discounts so much, kind of thing. And so sometimes it's you have these needs. We know where the product general price points are, kind of thing, range. So what if, there's some adjacent capabilities in this product? I wouldn't tell you to maybe buy it for that, but if they're legitimate And maybe that help you pull in some money from other budget buckets to be able to find enough money to be able to do this. Blue ocean strategy. There's actually literally a book about this called Blue Ocean Strategy. Surprise, surprise. And this is where it goes into the idea of, blue ocean versus red ocean. And here I will go ahead and I'll disappear for a second so you can see this while we're talking about it. So red ocean, there's sharks in the water, there's blood, it's a feeding frenzy, competing in existing market space. We must beat the competition. It's all about getting the most out of the existing demand and really kind of the race to commoditization and who can do that best. Blue ocean is we are going to create a new category, uncontested market space, making the competition irrelevant. We're going to create and capture new demand. We may have to pay a category creator tax to help people understand this, but we're not a commodity. We're not commoditized. So you may still have in your living room one of the best examples of this. I do, and we still play it. Mario Kart is amazing. You might know that I'm referring to this. So when Nintendo brought out the original Wii, they chose not to compete on resolution and frame rates and graphic cards and all that kind of stuff. They competed on motion control and ease of use and capturing the casual gamer market, Wii Sports and Mario Kart, etc., way before the iPhone and Android kind of ate up the casual gaming market, right? And it was insanely, phenomenally successful thanks to that. Next, the law of unintended consequences. Or this is really actually about what is called systems thinking or systems theory. Whenever you have any sufficiently complex system or very complex system, you don't necessarily know the outcome, the consequence of any single given action because it gets multiplied in too many different ways, too many different decision trees, that kind of thing. So the story that I tell here is actually going back to a storage vendor that I've worked with in the past. I'm just going to leave the name out because I'm not here to take pot shots at anyone because it could be any storage vendor, okay? And I'd been a customer and had really great support experiences. And then later I was working as a partner SE around these same storage products and started to get increasing complaints from customers about bad support experience. And I was like, this is a little crazy. And candidly, when you're a partner, solutions integrator, SE, et cetera, you can't really do all that much about vendor support. You can relay all the concerns, but you don't control the vendor support experience. So digging in a little bit, I found from someone who told me a story they weren't necessarily supposed to tell me, but they're not there anymore, so it won't hurt them kind of thing. And this is now 10 years back too, is that this company had opened up a new support center in Florida. Nothing wrong with Florida. Staffed primarily with tier 1 folks fresh out of college. Nothing wrong with that either. We've all got to start somewhere. But what they did was they wanted to incentivize people to take ownership and problem solve and figure things out and not just kick things up the chain. What that turned into was customers that I had, my customers, getting told by support, I will not escalate your ticket. That's infuriating as a customer. Like, I've got a problem. You can't solve it. And you tell me I will not escalate it. Well, but think about it. Maybe for that person, they were incentivizing bonuses, maybe even if they, got hired, stay past their trial period, the support, engineers. That might be the one ticket that pushes them over the edge, not getting the bonus they need to make a house payment. Or it might be the one that means that they get let go at the end of that day or week. So there's no reason not for them not to basically say, I won't escalate your ticket. Hope that it's going to take some time for that unhappy customer to relay it around and they can figure it out in the meantime or buy them more time. And it turns into a really bad customer experience, an unintended consequence. Next, time. So this is where when sometimes I'm in person, I would ask folks, hey, do you know what this is? You know what this is? And do you know what time is on that binary clock? Hours, minutes, seconds. You can maybe see it better here actually than you could when it's on a projector screen up there. So, and if you want to take a guess what this is, feel free to put it in the chat. I've actually had people that were very convinced they had it right, and then I was like, I even stopped asking, what time it is, because it turned into all distraction in the presentation. There's two concepts to talk about here. The first is availability bias. The other is anchoring effect. So have you ever been in a decision process, whether it's sales or otherwise, where someone says, hey, I really want to go first, or someone else says, I want to go last. If someone says they want to go last, they think that whoever the decision maker is, you or somebody else, you're susceptible to availability bias, that whatever you hear last, you will remember the most, and you'll be biased toward making decisions based on the latest news, the latest what's been presented. I actually saw this personally when I was on an LMS committee, university, so learning management, software systems kind of thing, like Moodle and Blackboard, etc. And there was a really senior person on this board. There was a professor, very articulate, experienced, just dynamic, charismatic. And he was always very convincing about whatever the last product was that we'd heard about. And I didn't realize that for a little while, because I was sometimes like, well, hey, I think this other thing was better, but he's so convinced about this one. Maybe I'm wrong, because I was, there from an IT representation standpoint with some expertise, but, earlier in my career. What I realized eventually was that he was always most convincing and enthusiastic about whatever the most recent product was that we'd had a presentation on, which is availability bias. Let's flip that around. If someone says, I really want to go first, or that someone has what's called anchoring effect, that's where when you hear the first option, with the second one, instead of comparing it back to your goals and your requirements, you're comparing it to the last thing that you heard about. So now that allows whoever goes first to set the table, be able to define, the expectations, instead of it all being compared back to the original source and goals. So going to the moon, and NASA, grew up, have been down to the center in Florida, a JFK Rocket Center. I might get it wrong. It's impressive. It's really cool. But you think about it. We went to the moon, literally, and we did it with less processing power. I've got in this thing, and we all have sitting at our desks and our pockets right now, etc. And it was the era of, kids wanting to be astronauts. So NASA was flawless and incredible and amazing until NASA wasn't flawless. So if you remember the Challenger, that's what's showed here, explosion. In going through and reading the post-mortem report of this by scientists, the language is almost painful in its scientific precision. Successful outcomes caused people to ignore disconfirming information, out-of-spec performance, and dysfunctional decision processes. I don't think I'll ever forget hearing President Ronald Reagan at the time. And we won't forget them the last time we saw them, as they slipped the surly bonds of earth to touch the face of God. It's actually from a poem by John McGee, a fighter pilot who took one of the first flights to 30,000 feet. Now, that's a profoundly moving moment in speech. How much better would it have been if the president had never needed to give that speech? We've talked a lot here about impact and stories around business and technology and maybe in personal relationships, but this is not just about that. This is life impacting and life changing, how we see and view the world and how much we twist reality to fit into how we want to view the world. We all like to think we're special. I like to think I'm special, and we all are. We're all special snowflakes in our own way. And some of that comes from the ability to be creative. The idea that, like it says here, a great quote from Jeff Hawkins on intelligence, creativity, it's mixing and matching patterns of everything that you've experienced or come to know, kind of saying like, this is kind of like that, making associations. That's in our brain, it's in our cortex, taking all those different things and applying them. So how do we be creative? How do we think about even, as we think about mental models, it's a piece of that. So there's two pieces here. This even goes to a little bit of philosophy and even kind of stoicism. First, skills of reflection. This is the idea of slowing down our thinking process so we can become more aware of how we form mental models, how they influence our actions, kind of looking inward, taking that time to pause and reflect and think. That can be hard. Maybe in some ways the last year has afforded a lot of us more opportunity to do that, but it is hard. Often, we know, people aren't comfortable not picking up their phone, not being with people. Next, skills of inquiry. how we operate in face-to-face interactions with others, especially when we're dealing with complex and conflicting issues, and seeing the difference between what people say, or even sometimes what we say, and what we do, because those aren't necessarily the same thing. So there's actually a time where the partner that I was at, we got purchased by another much larger partner. I was responsible for the SE team at the time, and took that responsibility very seriously and trying to help that team navigate a different organization and being successful. Both myself, let's be real, as well as the folks that I was responsible for and had been entrusted with impact on their careers. So I was going through this partner and looking at, hey, so let's figure out, okay, what processes are we supposed to follow? Like, how can we be successful individually and as a team? So what are the various processes that we should be following, how to do things? But then also, who are the people inside the organization that are successful, and what are they doing? What processes are they following or not following? And finding actually that a lot of times the people that are successful in the organization weren't necessarily following the processes that I was being told to follow, and then realizing like, I can't discount that. We've got to navigate this environment and not cause problems. But that may or may not be linked to success and how we focus as a team and we do. Now, if you would like to learn more about this, there's actually a great article by Gabriel Weinberg, CEO and founder of DuckDuckGo. I actually wrote this years back, almost 5 years ago now. So you can find this just by, like it says there, you can Google or DuckDuckGo, DuckDuckGo mental models. You'll find this over on, I believe it's on medium.com. Mental models I find repeatedly useful. And he does a really great job of breaking down a huge amount of mental models. It's almost 200 there. I want to say it's 189 if I've got my math right. And going through, this is everything from biology to science to psychology. It's all over the place, right? Kind of thing, in good ways. The most frequently used ones, occasionally and rarely. So what if, personal challenge here, what if once a week you took half an hour, 15 minutes, some range of time, you went to this article, you clicked on one of these, because each one of them are hyperlinked, and then you can take the mental model and you put it into Google and search around on it. Okay, fine, kind of thing. And you learned about that mental model. In a year, or half a year, you'd have around 25, 26. You'd have around 50. And even if you don't actually remember all the details, you'll sound smarter just by talking about confirmation bias and availability bias. And hopefully we actually remember the real concepts here too. But that's the ability to dramatically expand our mental toolkit so we're not twisting reality to fit the limited ways that we view the world. I always wonder why birds choose to stay in the same place when they can fly anywhere on the earth. Then I ask myself the same question. As humans, we have the unique ability to change how we think, how we interact with people, how we process knowledge, how we view the world, how we impact change. Why not take that opportunity? Thanks for listening.